Let's make it sound sexy. You know? Because I feel like we always do it aggressively.
Yeah, okay. Stop, gender. Meek?
Not
Feminine?
meek, sexy.
Welcome back.
Welcome back to our channel.
My name is Kathy.
My name's Celeste.
We're back here for the first time this year, 2024. So thank you for being here with us. And today Celeste will be telling us the story. So buckle in, get your hot cocoa or your
Beverage.
and buckle in and get in.
Today, I'm going to be telling you guys about the silent twins, June and Jennifer Gibbons. Have you ever heard of the silent twins?
Oh my god. I think I might have, maybe.
Yeah, so the girls' parents, Aubrey and Gloria, met in Barbados in 1955.
Oh.
And they were really traditional. They decided to start a family right away. They had their first child, Greta, in 1957, and then their son, David, in 1959. Aubrey had a dream for his family. He just wanted to give them a better life, you know? And he had this dream of moving them somewhere else where they could thrive together. They ended up moving to Wales in 1960. The twins were born at a military hospital in Aden, Yemen.
Oh.
Yeah, on April 11th, 1963. This made the girls both Aries.
Cute.
Yeah, June was born first at 8:10 a.m. and then Jennifer was born 10 minutes later at 8:20. And right off the bat, like, the doctors and their parents realized that Jennifer was a lot stronger than June. She was a little bit bigger. You'll want to keep track of the twins and who's who throughout the story because it's just really interesting. You know, they were very different and really the same at the same time. So you'll see. Because the family was traditional, the homemaker duties were left to Gloria. So she was always at home taking care of the kids, and Aubrey was always at work. He was always gone. Gloria had her fifth child, Rosie, in 1967. Because Aubrey and Gloria were gone all the time, it kind of caused a little bit of a delay in June and Jennifer's speech development because they just didn't have anybody to help them practice, so they were a little bit behind. Like I said, they moved to the UK, and they actually moved as part of the Windrush generation. In 1948, the British Nationality Act gave people from the Caribbean the right to live and work in Britain. So basically it would just give them, it's
like a work
basically
visa.
Yeah, because of the post-war labor shortages and because the economy needed to be rebuilt, this presented a really good opportunity for families like the Gibbons. Aubrey worked as an assistant air traffic controller in the military, and because he was in the military, they lived on the Royal Air Force Base, and the houses were really similar to other military Air Force bases that you can think of. Just really bland, really boring, nothing super special. All the houses looked the same. They weren't exactly luxurious, and the family would move around a lot, which also had an impact on the girls' development. When they first moved to England, the family was faced with a lot of xenophobia and racism. It made it hard for them to, assimilate, It made it really hard for the twins to assimilate because they were already struggling a little bit developmentally with their, speech. So it just made things a lot harder for them because the community rejected them.
Wow.
Despite the prejudice that they were faced with, the Gibbons really tried to provide for their kids. So, for example, they really liked to make sure that the girls had reading materials at their disposal at all times, and later the girls would become consumed with the books.
Wow.
When the girls were little, they were nonverbal. They could only say 3 to 4 words at a time. Wow. And when they did speak, it was really, really hard to understand them. It wasn't clear what they were saying. And they also had a speech impediment that made it difficult to understand them. So they were just struggling to communicate all together.
Wow.
Without proper speech therapy or other proper support, it just got worse and worse. They became even more difficult to understand over time. In 1971, when the twins were 8 years old, they moved moved to Chivner, where they were faced with really severe bullying. So the girls were really, really quiet because nobody could ever understand them. And then on top of that, because they were so quiet, it made them targets for bullying, unfortunately. And on top of that, they were the only black students in an all-white school with their brother. So it was like, you know,
wow,
they were just targeted all the time. This was a time that they should have been supported by their peers. Like, when you're in that developmental stage, it's really important for you to feel supported so that you can grow. And they didn't have that, so it really set them back.
It stunted them.
Yeah, exactly. The girls felt really misunderstood because they always had to repeat themselves. Like, no one could understand them, and including their own family, and no one was trying to understand them. They felt ostracized, and so they made a pact that they would stop talking altogether.
That's great.
Including their family. They didn't want to talk to their family either. They also stopped making eye contact with people. Like, they just felt it was just hard for them to communicate at all. When they were being spoken to or addressed, they would just look directly down. If they were being asked questions, they wouldn't answer. They had a really hard time eating in front of people, so they would eat in their room. Like, their parents would bring up food to their room and just set it on a chair outside their room.
Wow.
They wouldn't go down to eat. Like, it was just too hard for them. And if they didn't have the privacy that they needed, like, they wouldn't eat at all. So
wow.
it was like, it just became more and more difficult for them to progress, you know. The only person that they would speak to was their little sister Rosie, who they shared a room with. And they would have these elaborate little, like, plays and, like, games that they would play with their dolls, and they would come up with these elaborate stories, and they would record all of it on a recorder. And that was, like, the only time that their parents got to hear them speak.
Wow. Were they speaking in English, or were they speaking...
We'll get to that.
Okay.
So in 1974, when the twins were 11, Aubrey was transferred to Haverfordwest, Wales, which is known for being racist. The girls attended school with their older brother, where, again, they were the only black children in the school. And again, they faced severe bullying, except this time it was way worse than before. They would get their hair pulled. They would be called racist names all the time. It got so bad that their teachers eventually let them leave 5 minutes early from class, which is so messed up. Like, why not just, like,
prevent the bullying?
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's heartbreaking.
I know. No one really sought to help the girls, and I don't really feel like the parents were to blame for this because they, like, came from a very different culture, you know?
Yeah.
And so I really don't think that I feel like they could have done more, but I don't blame them. I think it was more so on, like, the teachers who had experience with, you know, depressed children or children that wouldn't speak. Like, somebody should have given them the attention that they needed.
Yeah.
Nobody tried to help them until 1976, when the girls were 13 years old, and a school medical officer named John Reese came to the school to do tuberculosis vaccination. So he was doing the vaccinations on all the little kids. He was used to seeing all these white little kids, and for the first time literally ever in his life, he saw these two black little girls. He gave them the vaccinations, and neither of them even moved. They wouldn't talk to him. They wouldn't look at him. When he put the needle in their arms, both of them had no reaction, versus, like, the other kids who were scared or, you know, a little nervous. Like, they just stayed completely still. And then when they were done getting their vaccinations, they just stood up quietly and walked away in synchronized motions, just really, really slowly with their heads down, out of the room. He was really, really concerned with their behavior. He was like, I've never seen this behavior before. Like, why is nobody, like, concerned about this? So he went to the headmaster and he was like, I think we should pay more attention to these girls. Like, obviously something is going on, you know?
Yes.
And the headmaster was like, no, they're quiet. They don't bother anybody. Let's not make a big deal about it.
Wow.
Which is, like, really, I mean, people have theorized that was based in racism, and I agree with that theory, because I feel like if it was a white kid acting that way, then, like, the kids would have gotten help long before. It's how they described it, because the kids weren't being rowdy. They weren't, like, harming. They weren't doing anything. They weren't a concern, basically.
That's so messed up.
Yeah, because they didn't care, it jeopardized their mental health. But Reese didn't give up. He felt like the girls needed help, and so he ended up getting in contact with a child psychologist named Evan Davies. And basically, Evan Davies tried to talk to them, but they wouldn't speak, so he ended up referring them to this woman named Anne Treharn, and she was a chief speech therapist. And they started treatment with her in 1977, but still they never spoke. But because their behavior was so odd, they were often recorded. So there's a lot of tapes of them being recorded, and in these tapes, and Treharn was able to eventually diagnose the girls as elective mutes, and she was also able to determine that the girls were speaking a secret language, which was a mix of Barbadian slang and English spoken very quickly.
Oh. Wow.
And eventually became convinced that a game was going on. The girls also had what they called eye language, which was a secret eye language between the two of them. So if June said something that Jennifer didn't like, then Jennifer would like give her a look, and then June would all of a sudden like tense up or get really, really quiet out of nowhere. This would happen so often that Anne eventually felt that June was possessed by her twin.
Whoa.
A head teacher even called Jennifer evil. They felt as if Jennifer was controlling June.
Wow, that's so creepy.
They had really odd behaviors that they matched all the time, and they would always just be synchronized, and they would always move really, really slowly. And here's a clip.
During mealtimes, the rest of the children take absolutely no notice of the two girls.
That is so odd. What the heck?
Crazy, huh?
Why? I wonder why.
It was an odd phenomenon that nobody understood, you know?
Yeah.
And after 2 months, John Rees, Evan Davies, and Tim Thomas, a child psychologist that was assigned to June and Jennifer's case, felt like the twins should be transferred to Eastgate Center for special education, where they could be under the care of this woman named Kathy Arthur. She was an expert, so they felt like the girls would be in good hands. They started treatment with her in April of 1977, and they did about the same as they did in all the other classes and treatments that they had received previously. They barely acknowledged Kathy, and they barely acknowledged the other children that were there. Despite not speaking, the doctors still tried to get an understanding of why they acted the way they did, but there was no way for them to there was no explanation.
That is so crazy.
Yeah. And the therapy sessions that they had with Tim Thomas often proved frustrating because they wouldn't speak. They just didn't have anything, they just wouldn't speak. Tim Thomas would get frustrated, which is like, maybe you should be a child psychologist.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't be a... Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, he would get a bit frustrated, and the same frustration was reflected with their family. Their older sister, Greta, was like devastated by their silence. They often drove her to tears because she would just get so frustrated that the attention was always on them and they just wouldn't speak,
Yeah.
And like a lot of people felt like it was a game to them, like it was voluntary, like they had control over it kind of thing. By 1978, the doctors felt like they hadn't made as much progress as they wanted to or as much as they had hoped, and they were like, what can we do? And they felt like the next best step would be to separate the girls. If they could separate the girls, then maybe they could find their own sense of independence, and they could, like separate themselves from each other. Maybe June could find a sense of independence away from Jennifer if Jennifer was the one controlling her,
Yeah, true.
And so they felt like this would be the best option. June and Jennifer actually both agreed that this would be the best option for them. They wanted to separate. Like, they wrote multiple letters to the doctors stating that they wanted to separate, and they thought it would be a good idea.
Wow.
So at this point, they were undeniably relying on each other, and it was really unhealthy, and they agreed that it was time to be separated. June wrote to Kathy stating, "It would be a good idea if we separate. I think one should go and one should stay here. We act stupid when we're together. Some people think that we don't want to separate, but we want to, because it really is the best thing for us." Jennifer also conveyed this same sentiment to Kathy, stating, "It would be good if we separate. We both fight for the best things. We're both willing to lead our own lives, but when we're together, we just keep depending on each other too much." And they even said that they would start talking if they were separated. They were like, we'll start talking if you just like separate us. We'll try to start acting normal.
Wow.
And part of the staff's reasoning was that they had never been without each other, so how would they know what it's like, you know?
Yeah, that's crazy. I honestly didn't think that they would be for it. I thought they would be really against it. So I was really surprised to hear that they wanted to be separated.
Yeah.
And like with Jennifer being the more dominant one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like it would make sense that that her sister would want to leave, but with Jennifer wanting to leave too, it's like, kind of makes you a little bit curious. Like, why do they both want to leave?
Exactly. To me, it really seemed like throughout learning about this case that they just wanted help, you know?
Yeah.
Tim Thomas sat the girls down and he let them know that they would be the ones making the choice. And they said one of them would stay at Eastgate, the other would go to St. David's Adolescent Unit, which was another school for special needs children.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't react right away, but after a few moments, they both got super pissed. Both of them, their hands started clenching up. They turned to each other and Jennifer jumped on June. She scratched her face. They were screaming at each other. They both stood up and they were running around the room screaming at each other. And keep in mind, these girls don't talk. Like, they never talk. They write in their diaries. Like, they write letters and stuff, but they never talk. So they went from being completely silent, not making any eye contact, to suddenly facing each other and getting into a rage.
Wow.
Jennifer kept chanting to June, "You are Jennifer. You are Jennifer." This gave them a new insight into the girls' relationship, you know? It was like, what does this mean? You know? It's like,
yeah,
it almost feels like they can't escape each other.
wow,
Like they're possessed with each other, you know?
Oh my god.
At this point, the doctors were unsure what to do. Like, some of them felt like separating them would be the best thing to do still, because they're mad, but like they could still benefit from this, you know? And so they ended up coming to a unanimous decision to go ahead and move forward with separating the girls. And the girls would not talk to the staff at all. But during this time, when the staff was deciding if they were gonna like separate them or not, they would call the staff and beg to be kept together.
Wow.
Despite the outbursts between the girls, the pleas to stay together, and what it could mean to separate them, the doctors decided to move forward with the separation, which did not benefit the girls at all. It was determined that June, now 14, both the girls are 14 years old, she would be transferred to St. David's and Jennifer would stay at Eastgate. But upon separation, the girls did really, really poorly. June went into a catatonic state where she would be crying for so long that she would just have tears and snot like pooling.
Ooh.
The doctors, like the medical staff, had to come in and like wipe her face, but she wouldn't move. She would just sit there and cry. In her classes, in her bed, she wouldn't sleep, she wouldn't eat, she would just sit there and cry, and all they could do was wipe away her tears. She wouldn't go to the bathroom or anything.
Wow.
She would sit on her bed without moving for hours. The only time that she seemed to get any energy back was when she was talking to her sister on the phone. And so the doctors were like, how much longer can June survive this, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we have to think about their overall health. And if this separation is not benefiting either of them, then we have to, you know, put them back together.
Yeah.
After 2 months, the experiment was abandoned because neither of the girls were doing well at all. And June was brought back to Eastgate.
Oh, good.
From 1978 to 1979, the girls started developing an affinity for writing and reading. They just loved books. They could read for hours and they would get lost in books. Writing was really their only form of communication that they felt like they had. And so they really turned to writing all the time. They would write in their diaries everything that they did. Something that was expressed in both of their diaries was that the girls felt like they were one entity in two bodies.
Whoa.
Which was reiterated in the documentary Silent Twins, Without My Shadow. When June stated, one day she'd wake up and be me, and one day I would wake up and be her. We used to say to each other, give me back myself. If you give me back myself, I'll give you back yourself.
Whoa. What? That's crazy.
I know. In 1979, at 16, after no progress, the girls left Eastgate, returning to their parents' house where they just lived in their bedroom alone, and they didn't talk to anybody or anything. They just literally would just stay up there all day, and they ended up getting some pen pals that they would write to. Yeah, but they would just hang out up there, and eventually they got some typewriters, and they would start, they would just start writing all day.
Wow.
Eventually, their writings became books, and both the girls wrote books. The girls used their unemployment benefits to get June's book, titled The Pepsi-Cola Addict, published. The book is about a high schooler who is seduced by a teacher and then sent away to a reformatory school where a guard also attempts to seduce him. Jennifer wrote a book titled The Pugilist, where a doctor kills his family dog in order to obtain a heart for his child's heart transplant, and the dog's ghost ends up haunting the family. They had several other writings, but none of the other writings were ever published.
Wow.
Which is really interesting because it's interesting that their writings were a little bit disturbing,
Yeah.
Because it just kind of shows you what kind of state of mind they were in. They had 2 years of this, just writing. Like I said, none of the other books became published. Over the next 2 years, the girls tried to break their silence, and they even took a class called The Art of Conversation, and it was just a class to teach you how to talk to people, but it wasn't successful.
Oh.
They were just excluded from the world, just writing up in their room. They didn't really have friends or a social life. They obviously didn't talk to their families, and they didn't have any contact with the doctors anymore. In 1981, when the girls were 21 years old, they had a new fascination, which was boys. And they would write all about the boys that they had crushes on. They would spy on them. They would just look at them they had a pair of binoculars, and they would just spy on boys.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And when June and Jennifer were at Eastgate, there was this particular boy who was named Ted Davies. He defended them one time at Eastgate, and he was not a good kid. He was there for arson and theft. So he wasn't great.
Oh my
but
gosh.
he defended them, and it made them feel, they just were like, ooh.
They had a buddy, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's that's kind of hot. It's a, a guy defending your honor.
Exactly. And then after that, they just they always had a crush on him,
Mm-hmm.
And once they got out of Eastgate, they wanted to know what he was up to.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like, let's go to his house. The first time that they went to his house, they went up to the door and they found that the door was unlocked, and so they just went inside.
Oh.
They made themselves some peanut butter sandwiches, and they had some orange juice, and the Ted Davies had some brothers, and they went around the house and they were trying on the boys' clothes and just making themselves at home.
Oh, wow.
And Joe and Jackie Davies, who were the parents, came home and they caught the girls. And instead of calling the police or anything like that, they decided to interrogate the girls themselves. And they were like, "What are you doing in our house?" And the girls got, basically they got chewed out, and they were told not to come back, but they decided to continue coming back.
Oh my god.
And so the girls would get all dressed up in the morning. They would put on wigs and dresses and makeup, and they would go to the boys' house every single day. And they would just wait to get noticed. And eventually they found out that their big crush, Ted Davies, was going to move. He was going to college. But they quickly realized that he had some brothers, and they got really close with the brothers really quickly. Joe Davies, the dad, ended up telling the girls to never come back. He was like, "You can't keep coming to our house."
Yeah.
And so the girls would go and wait under the bridge, across the street from the house.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
You know what this reminds me of? Swarm.
Yeah, literally.
Right?
Yeah.
The show. Yep.
So the other boys, their names were Wayne and Carl Davies, and June and Jennifer started hanging out with them a lot. They actually started hanging out with them.
Wow.
And the boys introduced the girls to a whole new world. They introduced the girls to drugs and alcohol, and the girls finally found a sense of escape that they had never felt before. Even though the girls had a lot of fun with the boys, they were not nice to them. They would insult them. They wouldn't give them food if the girls were hanging out with Wayne and Carl all day. They wouldn't give them food or anything like that. And they would call them names. Sometimes they would hit them.
The boys would hit the girls?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, they were really, really mean. But despite the poor treatment that the girls had received from the boys, they felt like this was the first time that they were ever getting attention from people, and the first time that they ever felt like they felt comfortable, you know, because of the alcohol. And so it was just a new experience for them. They were okay with it, basically. One night, while they were all hanging out, they were drinking brandy and smoking pot. Bobby Davies brought the girls to a nearby church, and he attempted to have sex with June, but ended up having sex with Jennifer in front of June. And June watched, and in that moment, she felt like she started to see her sister differently, and she wrote about it. She said, "Something like magic is happening. I'm seeing Jennifer for the first time, like she is seeing me. I think she's slow, cold, and has no respect, and talks too much. But she thinks I'm the same. We're both holding each other back. There's a gleam in her eye. Dear Lord, I'm scared of her. She's not normal. She is having a nervous breakdown. Someone is driving her insane. It is me." And then 2 weeks later, June ended up losing her virginity to Bobby in front of Jennifer.
What?
And yeah, as you can imagine, that would cause more tension between the twins.
Yeah.
And because of this, Jennifer tried to kill her twin. She said in her diary, "I'm not ashamed to say that I tried to kill my sister. Things got out of hand. I did not succeed in strangling her with a wire to the radio. I'm sure she wanted to kill me too. I have a grave feeling she did."
Whoa. That escalated extremely quickly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. And then not too long after that, June and Jennifer were walking on a bridge together, and things got heated really quickly. Some things were said, I don't know exactly what, but June pounced on Jennifer and pushed her into the river, and she was pushing her sister under the water, saying, "Just die, just die." And Jennifer did not die. A car drove by, and June let go of her, and they started hugging after that, and they were like, "I love you so much, I'm sorry." And yeah.
That's so weird.
So, despite their fight and the ongoing tensions between the girls in their relationship, they felt like they had the best summer of their lives with the boys. For once, they were having fun, and they were living independently from the hospital and all the doctors and their parents. But their fun was short-lived, because the Davies ended up moving back to the U.S. at the end of the summer. And this would be their last summer outside for 11 years.
Whoa. 11 years. Holy cannoli.
In the fall of 1981, the girls developed an eating disorder because without the boys to focus on, they had this new obsession. They had to focus all of their energy onto something else because they just were trapped, you know. And they started binging and purging and writing about their love-hate relationship with food, and their relationship with food was not too different from their own relationship. It was a love-hate relationship, often writing about how they wanted to escape each other, but they couldn't let go of each other.
Wow, that is so crazy.
Yeah. In one journal entry, June wrote, "Jennifer and I are like lovers. She thinks that I'm weak. She knows not how I fear her. This makes me feel more weak. I want to be strong enough to split from her. Oh Lord, help me. I'm in despair."
Wow.
Jennifer wrote, "She should have died at birth. Cain killed Abel. No twin should forget that."
Ooh.
And June wrote, "I'm an enslavement to her, this creature, who is with me every hour of my living soul." And then Jennifer, "June can't be my real twin. My real twin was born at the exact same time as me, has my rising sign, my looks, my ways, my dreams, my ambitions. He or she will have my weaknesses, my failures, opinions. All this makes a twin. No differences. I can't stand differences." Eventually, the twins redirected their hate for food into the world, officially deciding that they wanted to become criminals. They were like, "We're gonna go," and this is where the true crime theme comes into the story.
Wow.
They were like, "Let's go join a gang," and the gang rejected them. But they were like, they still wanted to do some criminal activity, so they started doing whatever they could. They would steal, they would do graffiti, vandalize anything they could. They would break into places, break windows.
Wow.
And when they would do all this, they would call the cops on themselves, and then they would run away.
Come on.
Predictably, the twins' criminal activities got worse. June documented in her diary a scheme to go ahead create petrol bombs, expressing her ambition to become an arsonist. On October 23rd, 1981, they actually broke into a tennis court and set it on fire. Because it went so successfully, they wanted to burn down more stuff. So on October 24th, 1981, they brought their dream to life by breaking into and setting ablaze a tractor store, and this made them feel really, really powerful. Witnesses had placed the girls at the scene of the crime, so they
were caught.
Wow. They were brought into the station for questioning, but the twins refused to answer any questions. They're so good at not talking, so they eventually were released.
Wow.
But their criminal trajectory didn't stop there. They continued their criminal activity as often as they could. And on November 8th, they attempted to ignite a fire at Pembroke Technical College. However, their spree was cut short because there was a security guard on the campus and he heard them break in, and so he called for backup.
Oh, good.
They got arrested, and in their room, the police found all their diaries of them confessing to all their crimes, so it was really easy for them to get caught.
Dang.
This was irrefutable evidence, and this led to their confinement at Puckle Church Remand Center, 130 miles away from Haverford West, for 7 months as the judicial system figured out what they were going to do with the girls. When they arrived to the prison, they were in a catatonic state. Prison guard left them in their room, and when she came back to check on them, they were still just standing there. Like several hours later, they hadn't moved. The security guards just became obviously more concerned because the girls were just literally standing there.
Yeah.
And eventually they had to have security guards come in and physically pick them up and place them on their beds and force their heads back down to the pillow because they were so stiff.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I wonder why. That's so that's so extra.
I don't think they had control over it. I don't.
Oh really?
I don't know. I really, really don't know. I just feel like they're so odd.
Yeah.
I don't know what to think.
I don't know what to think either.
And life at Puckle Church was unbearable for the girls, both together and apart. If they were sharing a cell, they would often break out in really violent fights towards each other, and if they were separated, then they would become depressed and go into a catatonic state. And they both expressed extreme paranoia and frustration towards each other, thinking that they were, the other one was gonna kill them. Eventually, they returned to silence, complicating interactions with their assigned lawyers and therapists because they just felt trapped again, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
According to Dr. William Spry, one of their doctors, the twins eventually were convinced to talk at least a little bit over the phone. And from June's diary, she wrote, "We talked to the doctor about life. Jennifer told him about how she hears voices, sees visions, and wants to kill me. I told him about how sensitive I am, how I pick up people's moods, have dreams and visions. He's puzzled at our non-communication with my parents. He doesn't understand that. Haven't spoken sensibly to them since the beginning of my teenage years. I said it was a habit. He wasn't impressed. He thought we were perfectly capable of talking, but I said I'm too withdrawn. Jennifer is even more withdrawn than me, and she needs more help. I told him I'd like to kill her. I would like to strangle her. She told him how we attempted to drown each other in the river. I said that only one of us should have been born. Life would have been smoother."
Wow.
And Dr. Spry diagnosed the twins with the initial stages of schizophrenia, leading the Institute to deem them dangerous to themselves and everybody around them. And while Dr. Spry advocated for, mental health treatment and a mental health facility, the state chose a high-security mental health facility named Broadmoor Hospital that held some of the most dangerous and vile offenders
What the
to
hell?
ever exist. Yeah.
Why would they send them there?
Exactly. Because I feel like because of racism.
Yeah. Vilifying black people. Yeah. Black people with mental illnesses.
Yeah. Convinced that institutionalization would solve their issues, the twins pleaded guilty because they were this whole time I feel like they've just only ever wanted help.
Yeah.
And so they felt like they might get help here. Broadmoor was overcrowded and it was really, really scary. The twins were placed in separate wards, so they didn't even get to be together.
Oh my God.
And with an official schizophrenia diagnosis, the girls were being prescribed tranquilizers and really, really heavy medications, like mood stabilizers. Years passed and the twins remained at Broadmoor, with doctors consistently extending their treatment periods. And desperate for release, they ended up breaking their silence, which was huge.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically begged the doctors to just let them go. But there was a specific doctor there that rejected them, declaring resentfully that they would be there for 30 years. And without any social or economic power, the twins were trapped. They couldn't do anything. Aubrey and Gloria, initially trusting the British system, finally began realizing how urgent the situation had become. And in the documentary Silent Twins Without My Shadow, Aubrey expressed his concern at the girls' imprisonment, and Gloria even contested the belief that the girls were insane or mentally unwell, because the girls would write to her all the time, and based off of their really well-written letters, she was like, how could they be crazy if they're writing like this? Like, look at how well they're writing, you know? Yeah. And she felt like the letters proved that. The twins' letters during confinement mirrored the quality of their diary entries, revealing their intelligence and extraordinary writing abilities. Mm-hmm. Jennifer's letter to June at Broadmoor foreseeing her own fate highlighted their unique bond. A reporter named Marjorie Wallace got access to their diaries and quickly became their advocate. Like, at this point, she was like, I'm gonna advocate for them, and so she started to write about them.
Wow.
And through her efforts, the twins became symbols of injustice. There was a lot of attention that was brought on to the girls by Wallace, which was really good for them, because this was like a promise that they would be freed. In March of 1993, after spending 11 years at Broadmoor, the twins were granted permission to transfer over to Caswell Clinic, which was a medium security facility in Wales. Okay. So it'd be closer to their family and they would get treatment. However, on the day before their transfer, Jennifer started feeling really, really sick. She was expressing feelings of weakness and fatigue. And upon arrival at Caswell on March 9th, 1993, Jennifer had drifted to sleep in June's lap during the journey, and she could not wake up.
Oh my gosh, did she die?
She was taken to the hospital, and Jennifer passed away shortly thereafter due to acute myocarditis, which is a sudden inflammation of the heart. It's really uncommon, and most of the time if it does happen, it's not fatal at all. Jennifer was nearly 30 at the time. She didn't have any drugs or alcohol in her system, making her sudden death really puzzling to doctors.
Yeah. That's so crazy. What happened to her? I wonder why.
Jennifer was laid to rest in St. Martin's Cemetery in Haverford, West Wales, with a headstone bearing the inscription, "We once were two, we two made one, we no more two, through life be one." Jennifer's unexpected death never received a definitive explanation. It was labeled as a freak accident. And Marjorie Wallace, the reporter who shed light on the twins' story, she provided some insight, which is so interesting. A few days before she left Broadmoor, she was having a conversation with the girls when suddenly Jennifer said, Marjorie, I'm gonna have to die." Jennifer insisted that they had decided on this, that Jennifer had to die. And Wallace was really alarmed, but she didn't really think it was something to be concerned about because they were about to get help.
Yeah.
It appeared that the twins had concluded that one must die in order for the other one to live. And it was this sort of sacrifice. And while this explanation doesn't offer any kind of medical insight on Jennifer's passing, it does offer a really interesting explanation as to what might have happened. And then after Jennifer's passing, Wallace was speaking to June, who had the same sentiments about Jennifer's passing, saying that it was now June's responsibility to live freely for the both of them. Regardless of the accuracy of the twins' statements about Jennifer's death, it became evident that following the loss of her sister, June underwent amazing transformation. She started to thrive.
Wow. Described
as being in good spirits, June engaged in conversations more willingly than ever. And remaining at Caswell Clinic, June experienced a form of freedom from their intensely codependent relationship. A little over a year later, June's condition improved, leading to her release release on parole. Expressing excitement about her impending freedom, she shared in the documentary Silent Twins, "I feel like I'm living for her. I think that's what she would have wanted, for me to go on living for her."
Wow.
June moved into a halfway house initially, but quickly transitioned into her own apartment, and since then she lives a completely ordinary life, residing in the UK near her family, and she's open to any conversations with anyone interested. And if the pact I'm gonna cry. If the pact with Jennifer was true, June appears to be honoring her commitment to living a fulfilling life on behalf of the both of them. And that is the case of June and Jennifer Gibbons, the Silent Twins.
That was really good. That's beautiful. We were talking about, like, if one of us died earlier today, like, if the other one, like, she was like, you have to pursue art if I die. I was like, no! We're gonna finish our makeup. We'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
Oh, that was beautiful, Baba.
People gotta say that everything I do for you. Yeah. Everywhere I go, people gotta know I love you. And when they go, I know the flow will come to you. Every day I pray that I wake up, I'll say that I'll go.
All right, we're back.
Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoyed the story despite it being a sad one. I feel like it's still an interesting case, and if you have any comments or questions,
Suggestions?
let us know.
Email us.
Don't forget to give us a like and a little subscribe if you're still here.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
If you ever